Well, the first question, how did I get the job? I had a funny feeling that maybe Mike Walsh would have got it, but I'd been offered a job back at 2UE where I'd worked, and I went to give it the 3 months notice necessary in my contract. And whether or not he had this in mind, but Bill Stevenson, the manager, said, "Oh, that's a pity, because I was thinking of sending you to England to cover the Beatles tour." Changed my mind immediately. So I got the job. It was a secret deal that had been done by 2SM management. No one knew about it. As my trip overseas, I was supposed to be on holidays, and I went to America on the way through, arrived and was driving around in a car provided by the famous Lou Grade, which was very nice of him. And we arrived in Brighton, my wife and I. It's the first time she'd ever been overseas. And there was this banner saying, "Ringo Starr in hospital." My holiday was over. I had to dash back to London and start the whole tour. But all of the interviews are arranged by Ken Brodziak and by the management of the Beatles, and they were absolutely charming. I don't think we were frightened by the crowds, but we were fascinated by them. And I'm reminded of, if you asked me what it was all about, screaming girls. They were teenage girls, and it's happening again today, of course, with people like Justin Bieber. And I keep thinking of those days. But it was so horrendous that you knew that the next day it was going to happen again in a different city, not only in Australia, but all over New Zealand as well. I mean, every day there was a new city, a new crowd, a new press conference. But the most amazing one was Adelaide. And it was amazing too, because Bob Francis, he'd been left out. Adelaide wasn't going to get when I've got a tape of Ken Brodziak announcing the tour, just the 3 main cities down the east coast. Well, there were 300,000 people. Adelaide at that stage probably only had 600,000 people. That was the most extraordinary. I suppose the next one was Melbourne, where a group of kids were nearly pushed through the front plate glass window of the now no longer Southern Cross Hotel, and one of them happened to be a niece of mine. She was about 17 or 18. And a lot of these kids ended up in the foyer, on the floor, getting medical attention. I wasn't there at the time because we'd been held up on the way from the airport. But that was the sort of thing that happened every day. Well, those 4 weeks had a profound effect upon my life. I have 4 daughters, and 2 of them were teenagers. And of course, they wanted to meet the Beatles. It wasn't all that easy. I took them up to the hotel here in Sydney, and just as I got out of the lift, Brian Epstein was there, and he's about to leave. He was going to back home, and he said, "Why are you here?" I said, "I brought my daughters to meet the Beatles." He said, "I think that'd be very difficult." I said, "Brian, if my daughters don't meet the Beatles, I'm not doing the tour. I'm not going to New Zealand." They got to meet the Beatles. They have this photograph. It's nearly 50 years down the track, but you can imagine how popular they were at school. I'm not a behavioural scientist. I'm just a simple disc jockey who is fascinated by it all. And my biggest mistake, I still say to this day, that I was convinced that they were so successful, and they had 6 top records in the top 40, that they were going to be so overexposed, within 12 months no one would want to know about the Beatles. How wrong can you be 50 years later? 2 of them may be gone, but their legend lives on.